My fiancé insisted we have separate bachelor parties, so I decided to attend his as a surprise guest. Trent had been acting strange for months leading up to our wedding. Whispered phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Password changes on everything. New cologne I'd never seen before. When I suggested combining our bachelor and bachelorette parties, he practically jumped out of his skin. Some traditions are sacred, Brooke, he said, kissing my forehead. Trust me, you don't want to see what happens at a real bachelor party. It's disgusting guy stuff. His best man, Xander, arrived Friday night with a sly grin that made my stomach churn. As they headed out, I heard Xander mention the Marriott downtown, and something about making sure everything's perfect for tomorrow night. I waited exactly 45 minutes before following them. The hotel lobby was buzzing with weekend wedding parties and business travelers. I approached the front desk with my sweetest smile and slipped the young clerk a crisp $20 bill. My fiancé's having his bachelor party here tonight, I said conspiratorially. I wanted to surprise him with champagne. Could you tell me which room? He glanced around nervously before checking his computer. Presidential suite, 32nd floor. But ma'am, I really shouldn't. Another 20 crossed the marble counter. And maybe a housekeeping uniform? I want this to be really special. 10 minutes later, I rode the elevator up 32 floors dressed as hotel staff, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hallway was eerily quiet except for muffled music and masculine laughter coming from the suite at the end. I stood outside the door for a full minute, gathering courage. Finally, I knocked. Room service, I called in my best fake accent. Xander opened the door, clearly several drinks in. When his eyes focused on my face, all the color drained from his cheeks. Holy shit, he whispered, stumbling backward. I pushed past him into the opulent suite before he could stop me. What I saw made my entire world tilt sideways. No strippers gyrating around poles, no poker table covered in cards and cash, no drunk groomsmen doing shots. Instead, Trent sat on the leather sectional with his arm around a stunning redhead I'd never seen in my life. She was wearing an emerald cocktail dress that probably cost more than my car payment, and a massive diamond engagement ring that caught the overhead lights like a disco ball. Surprise, I said, my voice deadly calm despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. The suite fell completely silent except for the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Trent's face went through about 17 different emotions before settling on pure terror. Brooke, what the hell are you doing here? Apparently crashing your engagement party, I replied, gesturing toward the redhead who was now staring at me like I'd materialized from another dimension. She stood up slowly, confusion written across her perfect features. I'm sorry, but who exactly are you? His other fiancé, I said flatly. That's when I noticed the details that made my stomach drop straight through the floor. Wedding magazines scattered across the glass coffee table, the same ones from our apartment, venue brochures for the exact location where we'd booked our reception, even the same save-the-date design I'd spent weeks perfecting. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was planning identical weddings. The redhead's face went from confused to horrified in about 3 seconds. What do you mean, other fiancé? I walked over to the coffee table and picked up one of the venue brochures. Rosewood Manor, September 15th. Ring any bells? Her perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. That's our wedding date. Our venue. No, I said, my voice getting stronger with each word. That's my wedding date, my venue, my photographer, my caterer, my florist. I flipped through the magazines, pointing out pages I dog-eared months ago. These are my centerpiece ideas, my color scheme, my cake design. Trent finally found his voice. Brooke, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I turned to face him, and something cold and sharp settled in my chest. You're a lying, cheating piece of shit who's been planning to marry 2 women on the same day. The redhead sank back onto the couch like her legs had given out. I'm going to be sick. What's your name, honey? I asked gently. Vivian, she whispered. Of course it was. Trent always had a thing for sophisticated names. I'd always wondered if he'd picked me because Brooke sounded more exotic than my real name, Bailey. How long have you been engaged, Vivian? 8 months, she said, staring at her ring like it had turned into a snake. I've been engaged for 10 months, I said, which means he proposed to you while he was already engaged to me. Xander had retreated to the far corner of the room, probably calculating how to escape this nuclear disaster. The other groomsmen, I recognized them now as Trent's work buddies, were frozen like deer in headlights. This is insane, Vivian said, standing up abruptly. Trent, tell her she's lying. Tell her this is some kind of misunderstanding. Trent opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. No sound came out. He can't, I said, pulling out my phone. Because I have proof. I scrolled to our engagement photos and held the screen toward Vivian. Same pose, same photographer, same location. Want to see the receipts for the deposits? She grabbed the phone with shaking hands, swiping through image after image of Trent and me looking blissfully happy. When she reached the photos from last week, us taste testing the exact same wedding cake she'd probably sampled, she dropped the phone like it was on fire. You son of a bitch, she whispered, her voice deadly quiet. Trent finally stood up, his hands raised like he was surrendering. I can explain everything. Please do, I said, settling into the armchair across from him. This should be fascinating. He ran his hands through his hair, the same gesture he used when his computer crashed at work. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. What wasn't supposed to happen like this? Vivian demanded. The part where you proposed to another woman while you were engaged to me? I proposed to Brooke first, he said quietly. Something twisted in my stomach. Oh, great. Thanks for clarifying that I was the original victim. That's not what I meant. He was sweating now, dark patches appearing under his arms. I love you both. The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife. You love us both, I repeated slowly. So your solution was to marry us both on the same day at the same venue with identical weddings? I was going to figure it out, he said desperately. I just needed more time. Vivian laughed, but there was no humor in it. Figure it out? What were you planning to do, flip a coin? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights while my mind processed this insanity. Wait, I said, turning back around. The bachelor party. What was this supposed to be? Trent's face somehow managed to get even paler. This wasn't a bachelor party, I continued, the pieces falling into place. This was your engagement party. With her. Vivian's head whipped toward him. Is that true? I can explain. You threw an engagement party for your second fiancé while your first fiancé thought you were having a bachelor party for your wedding to her? I felt hysterical laughter bubbling up in my chest. That's actually impressive, in the most psychotic way possible. One of the groomsmen, I think his name was Devin, cleared his throat. Maybe we should leave? Nobody moves, I said sharply. I want witnesses for this train wreck. Vivian was pacing now, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor. How many people know? What do you mean? Trent asked. How many people know you're engaged to both of us? She demanded. Your family? Your friends? Your co-workers? The look on his face was answer enough. They all know, I said, feeling nauseous. Don't they? They all know about both of us. Xander shifted uncomfortably. Look, it's not like that. Shut up, Vivian snapped. I want to hear it from him. Trent collapsed back onto the couch, his head in his hands. My parents know about both of you. My brother. Some of my friends. And they were just okay with this? I asked incredulously. They thought I'd figure it out before it got this far. Got this far? Vivian's voice pitched higher. We're getting married in 2 weeks. I know! He exploded, finally showing some emotion. I know it's fucked up, okay? I know it's insane, but I couldn't choose. You couldn't choose, I repeated flatly. So instead of breaking up with one of us like a normal human being, you decided to plan 2 identical weddings and see what happened? I was hoping one of you would call it off, he admitted quietly. The room went dead silent again. One of us would call it off, Vivian said slowly. You were hoping one of your fiancés would break up with you so you wouldn't have to make a decision? He nodded miserably. I felt something snap inside me. Not break, but snap back into place like a rubber band. Suddenly, I wasn't hurt or confused or devastated. I was furious. You pathetic little coward, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You're 28 years old and you're too much of a child to break up with someone? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple, Vivian shouted. You pick one and you let the other one go, like a functioning adult. But I love you both, he said again, like that explained everything. No, I said. You don't love either of us. You love the idea of us. You love having options. You love the thrill of getting away with something. I pulled out my phone again and started scrolling through my contacts. Who are you calling? Trent asked nervously. The venue, I said. I'm canceling the wedding. Brooke, wait, actually, I said, pausing with my finger over the call button. I have a better idea. I looked at Vivian, who was watching me with interest despite her tear-streaked mascara. How would you like to plan the most epic revenge in the history of weddings? Her eyes lit up. I'm listening. We don't cancel the wedding, I said slowly. We show up. Trent's face went from pale to green. What? Both of us, I continued, warming to the idea. In wedding dresses. At the same ceremony. In front of all our friends and family. Vivian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. And let everyone see exactly what kind of man you really are. You can't be serious, Trent stammered. Dead serious, I said. We're going to give your wedding guests a show they'll never forget. That's insane, he said. Not as insane as planning to marry 2 women on the same day, Vivian pointed out. I looked around the room at his shocked groomsmen. Anyone want to back out of being in this wedding? They all looked at each other, then at Trent, then back at me. Devin spoke first. Actually, I think I need to be somewhere else that weekend. One by one, they all started making excuses and edging toward the door. Within 5 minutes, the presidential suite was empty except for Trent, Vivian, and me. This is crazy, Trent said. You're both crazy. We're not crazy, I said. We're creative. There's a difference. Vivian was already pulling out her phone. I need to call my maid of honor. She's going to lose her mind when I tell her about this. Wait, I said. Before we start making calls, we need to plan this properly. Over the next hour, while Trent sat in stunned silence, Vivian and I worked out the details of what we dubbed Operation Bigamy Bust. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Both of us would show up at Rosewood Manor on September 15th in full wedding regalia. I would arrive first, as originally planned, and the ceremony would begin normally. Vivian would make her entrance just as the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage. I'll walk down the aisle in my dress and announce that the groom is already engaged to someone else, she said, practically glowing with anticipation. And then I'll explain how he's been lying to both of us for months, I added. What about the reception? She asked. Oh, we're definitely staying for the reception, I said. We've already paid for it. We might as well enjoy the open bar while we watch his world burn. Trent finally found his voice. You can't do this. It'll ruin everything. Everything was already ruined, I said. We're just making sure everyone else knows about it. My parents will be there. My boss, your families. Good, Vivian said coldly. They all deserve to know what kind of person they've been celebrating. Please, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Can't we just call the whole thing off quietly? Like you called off one of your engagements quietly? I asked. Oh wait, you didn't do that. He tried a different approach. What about the money? You'll lose your deposits. I'd rather lose $5,000 than spend the rest of my life married to a lying sociopath, Vivian said. Besides, I added, we're not canceling anything. We're still having a wedding. It's just going to be a very different kind of ceremony than you expected. We exchanged contact information and made plans to meet the next day to coordinate our outfits and finalize the details. As we were getting ready to leave, Vivian turned back to Trent one last time. For what it's worth, she said, you almost had me fooled. If you'd just been honest about wanting to keep your options open, I might have even respected that. But this? She gestured around the suite. This is just pathetic. I followed her toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Trent? You might want to start looking for a new place to live. I'll have your stuff packed and ready for pickup tomorrow. We left him sitting alone in his expensive hotel suite, surrounded by the ruins of his elaborate deception. In the elevator, Vivian and I looked at each other and started laughing. Not the kind of laughter that comes from joy, but the slightly hysterical laughter that happens when your brain finally processes something completely insane. I can't believe this is really happening, she said. I can't believe he thought he'd get away with it, I replied. What kind of person thinks they can marry two people on the same day? The kind of person who probably has more secrets we haven't discovered yet. That sobered us both up quickly. You're right, she said as we reached the lobby. This probably isn't the only thing he's been lying about. We walked out of the hotel together, two women who'd been strangers an hour ago but were now united by the most bizarre circumstances imaginable. Same coffee shop tomorrow at 10? Vivian asked. Absolutely, I said. We have a wedding to plan. The next morning I woke up in my apartment, soon to be my former apartment, with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. All those weird little inconsistencies in Trent's behavior finally made sense. The mysterious phone calls, the password changes, the new clothes and cologne. He'd been living a double life, and he'd been surprisingly good at it. I started going through our shared belongings, separating my things from his. In the back of our closet, behind his winter coats, I found a box I'd never seen before. Inside were two sets of wedding planning documents, one with my name, one with Vivian's. Everything was identical except for the names and contact information. I photographed every page, creating a detailed record of his deception. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A third folder, labeled with a name I didn't recognize. Melody Parnell. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were printouts of dating app conversations, restaurant receipts, and what looked like the early stages of another relationship. The dates on the receipts were from last month. He wasn't just planning to marry two women, he was already working on a third. I called Vivian immediately. You need to see this, I said. Can you come over? She arrived 20 minutes later with coffee and grim determination. When I showed her the Melody folder, she sat down heavily on my couch. He's a serial monogamist, she said. Except he skipped the part where you end one relationship before starting another. How many more do you think there are? I asked. Only one way to find out. We spent the next 3 hours doing the most thorough internet stalking of our lives. Melody Parnell turned out to be a 26-year-old marketing executive who'd been posting photos of fancy dinners and mysterious flower deliveries on her Instagram for the past month. Look at this, Vivian said, showing me her phone. Posted 4 days ago. When someone special surprises you at work with lunch from your favorite place. That's the Italian place where he took me for our 6-month anniversary. He took me there for our first anniversary, I said. Same restaurant, same booth, same order. He probably has the manager on speed dial. We found 2 more women in his social media orbit who seemed to be receiving unusual amounts of attention from him. Neither appeared to be at engagement level yet, but the pattern was unmistakable. This is what he does, Vivian said. He collects women like trophies, keeps us all separate and compartmentalized so we never find out about each other. Until now, I said. We decided to reach out to Melody. Vivian crafted a careful message explaining that she'd been dating someone who matched Trent's description and was concerned about some inconsistencies in his story. Could they meet for coffee? Melody agreed immediately. That was too easy, I said. Because she's probably having the same weird feelings we both had, Vivian replied. Something doesn't feel right, but she can't put her finger on what it is. We met Melody at a cafe across town. She was exactly what I'd expected. Beautiful, successful, and completely unaware that she was being manipulated by a master manipulator. He told me he'd never been engaged, she said after we explained the situation. Said he was waiting for the right person to come along. When did you meet him? I asked. 6 weeks ago. He's been incredible. Flowers, surprise dinners, weekend trips. It felt like a fairy tale. Vivian and I exchanged glances. Has he mentioned anything about getting serious? Moving in together? Meeting his family? Melody's face lit up. Actually, yes. He said he wants me to meet his parents next weekend, and he's been asking about my thoughts on marriage, kids, all that stuff. Classic pattern, I said. He moves fast to establish emotional connection, then starts planning the next phase before you have time to think clearly. But why? Melody asked. What's the point of dating multiple women simultaneously? Control, Vivian said. He gets to have everything he wants without making any real commitments. If one relationship gets too complicated, he has backups. Plus the thrill, I added. Some people get addicted to the rush of keeping secrets and almost getting caught. We showed Melody the evidence we'd compiled. The duplicate wedding plans, the photos, the receipts from dates he'd taken all of us to the same places. Her face went from confused to angry to disgusted. I'm going to be sick, she said. Join the club, Vivian said. But we're not just getting mad. We're getting even. We brought Melody up to speed on Operation Bigamy Bust. Her eyes widened as we explained our plan for the wedding day confrontation. That's brilliant, she said. But what about after? He'll just move on to the next victim. Not if we make sure everyone knows what he did, I said. His friends, his family, his coworkers, his gym buddies. By the time we're done, he'll be radioactive in this town. I want to help, Melody said. What can I do? We spent the next hour expanding our plan. Melody would continue her relationship with Trent as if nothing had changed, gathering more evidence of his deception. She'd also reach out to the other women we'd identified to see if they were involved with him too. This feels like a military operation, Vivian said. Good, I replied, because we're going to war. That evening, I had dinner with my parents to give them a heads up about what was going to happen at the wedding. I couldn't tell them everything. They'd try to talk me out of it, but I needed them to be prepared for some drama. Trent and I have been having some serious problems, I said carefully. There might be some unexpected complications at the wedding. My mother immediately went into panic mode. What kind of complications? Can you work it out? The deposits are non-refundable. I know about the deposits, Mom. And no, we can't work it out. He's been lying to me about something major. My father set down his fork. How major? Major enough that the wedding might not go as planned. They pressed for details, but I held firm. They'd understand everything in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Melody had started her undercover operation. She accepted Trent's invitation to meet his parents and discovered that they knew all about Vivian and me. They seemed genuinely surprised that he was dating yet another woman. His mother pulled me aside and asked if I knew about his other commitments, Melody reported during our next meeting. When I played dumb, she looked horrified and said she thought he was getting his life together. So his family knows he's a disaster, but they're still enabling him? Vivian asked. Sounds like it. His dad made some comment about hoping this time would be different. This time? I said. You mean he's done this before? That's what it sounded like. We were uncovering more pieces of the puzzle every day, and each revelation made our planned confrontation feel more justified. Trent wasn't just a confused guy who'd gotten in over his head. He was a habitual liar who'd been manipulating women for years. The other 2 women we'd identified turned out to be early-stage targets. One had only been on 2 dates with him. The other had been seeing him for 3 weeks but hadn't met his friends or family yet. We warned them both, and they immediately cut off contact. 5 women, Vivian said during one of our planning sessions. 5 women he was actively pursuing at the same time. That we know about, I corrected. There could be more. As the wedding date approached, Trent became increasingly desperate. He called and texted constantly, begging me to reconsider, promising he could change, insisting that what we had was special and real. I didn't respond to any of it. He showed up at my office, at my gym, at my favorite coffee shop. Each time I walked away without speaking to him. His increasingly erratic behavior just confirmed that we were doing the right thing. 3 days before the wedding, he somehow got hold of Vivian's phone number and called her. He's completely lost it, she told me afterward. He was crying, saying he'd made terrible mistakes but that he really did love both of us. He wanted to know if there was any way we could work something out. Work something out? Like what, a polygamous arrangement? That's actually what he suggested. We both started laughing, the same slightly hysterical laughter we'd shared in the hotel elevator. The man who was too cowardly to break up with one girlfriend now thinks we'll agree to share him permanently, I said. I told him he was insane and hung up. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the signs I'd missed. All the times something had felt off, but I dismissed my instincts. The wedding dress hanging in my closet looked like a costume for a play I didn't want to perform in. But this wasn't about the wedding anymore. This was about making sure Trent couldn't do this to anyone else. I got up and wrote out everything I wanted to say during the ceremony. I wanted to be clear and factual, not emotional. The guests deserved to know exactly what kind of person they'd been celebrating. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Ready for tomorrow? Ready, I replied. Any second thoughts? I considered the question seriously. Was I really prepared to blow up my own wedding in front of 150 people? To humiliate myself along with Trent? Then I thought about Melody, and the other women he'd been targeting, and all the future victims he'd find if we didn't stop him. None, I texted back. You? None? See you at Rosewood Manor. The morning of September 15th was unseasonably warm and sunny, perfect wedding weather. I got ready at my parents' house, going through all the traditional motions. My bridesmaids did my hair and makeup, helped me into my dress, fussed over every detail. They had no idea what was really about to happen. You look beautiful, my maid of honor said, tearing up. Trent is so lucky. If only she knew. The limousine ride to the venue felt surreal. My bridesmaids chattered excitedly about the ceremony and reception, while I sat quietly, mentally rehearsing my speech. Rosewood Manor looked exactly like I dreamed it would. The gardens were perfect, the decorations were elegant, and the weather was cooperating beautifully. Under different circumstances, it really would have been the perfect wedding. I checked my phone. Vivian had texted, "In position. Are you ready?" "Ready," I replied. My father appeared at my side, looking handsome in his tuxedo and slightly emotional. "Are you nervous, sweetheart?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The music started, and my bridesmaids began their procession down the aisle. Through the venue's French doors, I could see the guests rising to their feet. Everyone looked happy and expectant. In a few minutes, they'd be shocked beyond belief. "Your turn?" the wedding coordinator said with a bright smile. I took my father's arm and stepped into the doorway. The view down the aisle was breathtaking. Flowers everywhere, candles flickering, familiar faces beaming at me from both sides. And there was Trent, standing at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking pale, but determined. His eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of hope cross his face. He still thought he could talk his way out of this. I started walking down the aisle. my dress rustling against the rose petals scattered on the ground. Everything felt dreamlike and hyper-real at the same time. Halfway down the aisle, I spotted Trent's parents in the front row. His mother was crying happy tears. His father was recording everything on his phone. I wondered what they'd think of that video in about 10 minutes. The ceremony began exactly as rehearsed. The officiant welcomed everyone and launched into his prepared remarks about love and commitment. Trent and I stood facing each other, holding hands, playing our parts perfectly. Marriage is a sacred union, the officiant continued, built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. I almost snorted. The irony was too perfect. We got through the opening remarks and the readings. My cousin performed a beautiful song about soulmates finding each other. One of Trent's college friends read a passage about the importance of fidelity in marriage. If this had been a movie, it would have been a comedy. Finally, we reached the vows. Trent went first, pulling out a piece of paper and clearing his throat. "Brooke," he began, his voice carrying across the silent garden, "2 years ago, you walked into my life and changed everything. You made me want to be a better man." Several guests sighed at the romantic sentiment. If they only knew. "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for the rest of our lives. I promise to be faithful to you and only you, to support your dreams and share your burdens." The word faithful hung in the air like a poison cloud. "I promise to choose you every day, to put our relationship first, and to never take your trust for granted." He folded the paper and looked at me with what appeared to be genuine emotion. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the folder with Melody's name on it. "Brooke," the officiant said, "your vows?" I pulled out my own piece of paper. Not the romantic vows I'd originally written, but the speech I'd prepared the night before. "Trent," I began, my voice steady and clear. "2 years ago, you walked into my life and lied to me about everything." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Trent's face went white. "You lied about your past relationships. You lied about your intentions. You lied about wanting a future with me." The whispers were getting louder now. I could see people leaning forward, straining to understand what was happening. "Most importantly, you lied when you told me I was the only woman you'd ever proposed to." Trent made a strangled sound and reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Because the truth is, you proposed to another woman while you were engaged to me, and then you planned identical weddings for both of us on the same day." The gasps from the crowd were audible now. Trent's mother had gone pale. My own parents looked like they'd been struck by lightning. "So no, Trent, I don't take you to be my husband. Instead, I'd like everyone to meet the other woman you proposed to." Right on cue, the doors at the back of the garden opened, and Vivian appeared in a stunning white gown, her red hair flowing behind her like fire. She walked down the aisle with her head held high, ignoring the chaos erupting around her. The guests were on their feet now, some shouting questions, others pulling out their phones to record. It was pandemonium. Vivian reached the altar and stood beside me, facing the crowd. "Hello, everyone," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "I'm Vivian Chen, Trent's other fiancé. We were supposed to be married today, too." The silence that followed was deafening. Trent finally found his voice. "This isn't what you think. It's exactly what they think," I interrupted. "Show them the evidence." Vivian pulled out her phone and began projecting photos onto the venue's large screen, the one that was supposed to show our wedding slideshow. Instead, it displayed side-by-side images of our identical engagement rings, our matching save the dates, our duplicate venue contracts. "He used the same photographer," Vivian explained calmly. "Same florist, same caterer, same officiant. He planned identical weddings down to the smallest detail." A woman in the crowd, I think it was one of Trent's aunts, shouted, "This is impossible." "It's completely possible," I said, "because he's been doing this for years. Show them the rest." Vivian switched to a new set of photos. The dating app conversations with Melody and the other women, the receipts from dates he'd taken multiple women to the same restaurants, the evidence of his pattern of deception. 5 women, I announced to the crowd. He was actively pursuing 5 different women while engaged to both of us. Trent's best man, Xander, had gone completely green. The other groomsmen were backing away from the altar like Trent had a contagious disease. "This is insane," someone yelled from the back. "Yes, it is," Vivian agreed. "It's insane that a grown man would think he could get away with something like this." Trent finally exploded. "You're both crazy. You're ruining everything." "We're not ruining anything," I said. "We're revealing the truth. There's a difference." The officiant, who had been standing frozen throughout this entire exchange, finally found his voice. "Perhaps we should move this discussion somewhere more private." "No," Vivian said firmly. "Everyone here deserves to know what kind of person they came to celebrate. They took time out of their lives, bought gifts, traveled here to witness what they thought was a sacred commitment. They deserve to know it was all based on lies." I looked out at the crowd and saw a mix of expressions: shock, anger, confusion, and surprisingly, some nods of approval. My grandmother, bless her heart, was actually clapping. Trent's mother stood up in the front row, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to these women? How could you do this to us?" "I was going to figure it out," Trent said desperately. "I just needed more time." "Time to do what?" his father demanded. "Marry them both?" "I don't know," Trent shouted. "I don't know what I was going to do." The honesty of that admission seemed to hit everyone at once. This wasn't a man who'd made a mistake. This was someone who'd been completely out of control, making increasingly desperate choices without any plan for the consequences. "Well, now you don't have to figure it out," I said, "because we're both done with you." I pulled off my engagement ring and handed it to him. Vivian did the same. "Enjoy your freedom," she said. "Use it to get some therapy." We turned to leave, but Trent grabbed my arm. "Brooke, please, don't do this. We can work this out." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. All the charm and confidence that had initially attracted me was gone, replaced by desperation and panic. "No, Trent, we can't work this out, because there is no we. There never was. You can't build a relationship on lies." I gently removed his hand from my arm and walked away. Vivian and I made it halfway back down the aisle before the crowd erupted again. Some people were applauding, actually applauding our dramatic exit. Others were demanding explanations from anyone who would listen. I spotted Melody near the back of the crowd. She gave me a small wave and a thumbs up. As we reached the garden exit, my mother intercepted us. "Brooke, honey, what just happened?" "I'll explain everything later, Mom. Right now we have a reception to attend." "A reception? But there's no wedding. There's no marriage," I corrected. "But there's still an open bar and a band, and we already paid for it." Vivian grinned. "Plus, I want to try that cake we both tasted." An hour later, the reception was in full swing. About half the guests had left, but the remaining half seemed determined to make the best of the bizarre situation. The band was playing, the bartenders were busy, and the dance floor was crowded. I changed out of my wedding dress into the reception dress I'd planned to wear later. Vivian had brought a change of clothes too, a stunning cocktail dress that made her look like a movie star. We held court at the head table, regaling anyone who'd listen with the full story of Trent's deception. The reactions ranged from horrified to impressed to thoroughly entertained. "I can't believe he thought he'd get away with it," one of my college friends said. "I can't believe he almost did," another added. My grandfather, who'd been quietly observing everything, raised his glass of whiskey. To my granddaughter and her new friend for having the courage to choose truth over convenience. The toast was echoed around the room. Trent had disappeared shortly after our revelation. His parents had stayed for a while, apologizing profusely to anyone who'd listen, but eventually they'd left too. Most of his friends and family had followed. "Do you think we were too harsh?" Vivian asked during a quiet moment. I considered the question. Would you rather we'd kept quiet and let him keep doing this to other women? Hell no. Then no, we weren't too harsh. As the evening wound down, people started approaching us individually to share their own thoughts about what had happened. "I knew something was off about him," one of my coworkers said, "but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. He always seemed too smooth," added someone else. "Like he was performing instead of just being himself." Several women shared stories of men who deceived them in smaller ways, lies about their jobs, their age, their relationship status. Our dramatic confrontation had struck a chord with people who'd experienced betrayal in their own lives. "You did the right thing," my maid of honor said as we were cleaning up. "It took guts to do it this way, but everyone needed to see who he really was." Near midnight, as the last guests were leaving, Vivian and I found ourselves alone on the garden terrace where I'd planned to take wedding photos. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we move on with our lives," I said, "without him in them. Are you going to stay in town?" I'd been thinking about that all evening. Probably not. Too many people know the story now. I think I need a fresh start somewhere else. "I'm thinking the same thing," she said. "Maybe we should be fresh start buddies." The idea was appealing. We'd been through something completely unique together. It seemed fitting that we'd continue forward together too. "Where were you thinking?" "Anywhere but here," she said with a laugh. We exchanged contact information and promised to stay in touch. As I was gathering my things to leave, I found an envelope on the gift table with my name on it. Inside was a note from Melody. "Thank you for saving me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I know this couldn't have been easy, but you probably saved other women too. I hope you find the happiness you deserve." There was also a check for half the amount of my wedding expenses. "She didn't have to do that," Vivian said when I showed her. "No, but it's a nice gesture." The drive home was quiet. I was emotionally drained, but oddly at peace. It would take time to process everything that had happened, but I knew I'd made the right choice. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the video online. "You're my hero. A grateful sister." Apparently someone had posted footage of our confrontation on social media. Within hours, it had gone viral, with thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of relationship betrayal. Over the next few weeks, I received dozens of messages from women thanking me for exposing Trent's behavior. Several mentioned that they'd been in similar situations, but hadn't had the courage to speak up. That's when I realized our dramatic wedding day confrontation had accomplished something bigger than just stopping one serial cheater. It had started a conversation about the importance of honesty in relationships and the courage required to walk away from people who don't deserve your trust. A month later, I got a job offer in Seattle. Vivian had found work in Portland, just 3 hours away. We met halfway for dinner to celebrate our new beginnings. "Any regrets?" she asked over dessert. I thought about it seriously. The public humiliation had been intense. The social media attention had been overwhelming. The financial cost of the wedding and moving across the country had been significant. But I'd also learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. I discovered I could trust my instincts, stand up for myself, and choose truth over comfort. "None," I said. "You?" "None," she echoed. 6 months later, we were both settled in our new cities, building new lives far away from the chaos Trent had created. I'd heard through mutual friends that he'd left town too, though no one seemed to know where he'd gone. I hoped he'd use the experience as a wake-up call to get professional help, but mostly, I hoped I'd never have to think about him again. The last time Vivian and I talked, she mentioned that she'd started dating someone new. A divorced dad who'd been completely upfront about his past relationships and his priorities. He actually introduced me to his ex-wife at his daughter's soccer game, she said. Can you imagine Trent doing something like that? I couldn't. The man who'd been too cowardly to break up with one girlfriend would never have been mature enough to maintain a healthy relationship with anyone from his past. How are things with your new guy? She asked. I'd been seeing someone too, a nurse from the hospital where I'd found work. He was the opposite of Trent in every way that mattered. Honest, straightforward, and completely uninterested in playing games. Good, I said. Really good. He actually communicates when something's bothering him instead of sneaking around and lying about it. Revolutionary concept, Vivian said with a laugh. As I hung up the phone, I thought about how different my life was now compared to a year ago. The wedding that was supposed to be the beginning of my happily ever after had instead been the beginning of my real life. Messy and uncertain, but completely honest. I'd learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Sometimes you have to blow up your entire world to discover who you really are. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is trust yourself enough to walk away from someone who doesn't deserve you, even when it means walking away from everything you thought you wanted. The truth might be painful, but it's always better than living a lie, even when the truth ruins your wedding day, especially then.